Hi, I'm Loraine Prokopiou, and this workout today is looking at the lower limb. This is our sort of first basic level, and I'm really focusing in on lower limb alignment today. And I'm going to be working on the Align-Pilates A8-Pro Reformer, which is this lovely one here. I'm going to use the rotational discs as well, and we will use the large Swiss ball. So we're going to get started. We're going to start standing and have a little think about your alignment. So if you just march on the spot, just don't think about anything if you can. And then just let your feet come to a stop and then take a little look and see where your feet end up. In an ideal world, they're parallel. Now before you move them, just have a little bend of your knees as well and check, just a small bend, and just check where your knees are pointing to. Quite often what happens is that we end up with the feet turned out, the knees rolling in a little bit. Now I don't know if you can see that, but that sort of just encourages my bunion, which is probably why I've got one. And the knees will tend to knock in when you bend them. I'm kind of exaggerating now, but there is that sense of the knees knocking in. And you'll quite often see people walking around with their feet turned out somewhat. So, one of my esteemed colleagues talks about a car going forwards with their wheels pointing out this way. What happens further up the chain, further into the car, is going to have knock-on effects. So we're trying to think about driving our car with the wheels facing forwards. So looking at those parallel feet now. So you're going to move your feet now so they are parallel. And I like to think about your medial malleolus, so that's your inner ankle bone. Think about gently pulling your inner ankle bone outwards and then release. It's quite a small, subtle movement. I'm hoping you can see that. But as I pull my inner ankle bones out, I get a very subtle lift of the arch of the foot, which is often what's missing. So I'm going to do one more there, pull the inner ankle bones out, and then I'm going to stay there. Now I'm trying not to do this by rolling onto the outside edge of the feet. I'm just pulling the inner ankle bones slightly apart, keeping my bunion joints down onto the floor and trying to be relaxed through the toes. I'm holding that on. I can do this and talk at the same time. So it's a low level exercise that we're just trying to get that little bit of correction, trying to work through the feet and through the muscles around the ankles. And then if I bend my knees now, I get a good alignment through the knees, dropping over the toes. And in an ideal world, your kneecap lines up between toes number 2 and 3. So I like to think about my shins coming forwards over the middle of the foot and my knees lining up there as I'm doing my knee bends. I hope you're joining me. And then I'm going to go one more. And then I'm going to rise onto the toes. So I push down through all 10 toes. Now what tends to happen, especially if you're like me and you've got a bit of a bunion or a bit of a stiff big toe joint, that you'll roll onto the outside edge of your feet. So try not to let that happen. Keep the big toes down into the floor. So the bases of all 10 toes are pushing down into the floor as I rise and lower. What really helps me is if I think about my center almost floating me up and then release down. So just by connecting into your center, you find that easy length through the spine, and then I find I can drive up through those calves a little easier. I'm going to put those two together. So I'm going to bend the knees, straighten the knees, and then rise through the toes and bring the heels back to the floor. Let's do 2 more rounds there. Bend, straight, rise, release. One more. Bend, straight, rise, release. The other thing I like to think about as well is that you've got the outer hip bones lining up with the outer ankle bones. So your greater trochanter with your lateral malleolus. And what we often do is stand in a slight sway back so the pelvis tends to come forwards. So we want to just think about bringing the outer hips to line up with the outer ankles. So you've got a slight back feeling. So I'm thinking a little bit more about taking some weight back into my heels, and I'm trying to relax through my thighs. All right, we're going to do just a little bit of spinal work just to get a bit more movement going on. So I'm just going to bend my knees and perch my sit bones on a high bar stool, and I'm just going to do an easy twist just letting the arms swing around the body. Just taking that twist as far as you feel happy going. And then I'm going to come back into the center and just straighten the knees and hold there. Take a moment to think about that alignment, outer hips, outer ankles. Pull the inner ankle bones away from each other a little bit and try and rest in that posture. And then I'm going to come up and over and do a little side bend here. Return to the center, other side. Return to the center. Then I'm going to let this hand slide up the side of the body for a slightly bigger stretch. And then I'm going to do the other side. And then we'll go one more each side, and I'll just sweep this arm up and over the ear, controlling through that side bend there, and release. And then the other side, up and over. And then back through the center and release. So I'm going to come and sit down onto the reformer now and use the rotational disc. Now at this point in time I've got one green and one red spring attached to the reformer, so I'm all set, and I know my reformer is not going to slide away from me as I come into a sitting position. And then I'm just going to place the feet onto those rotational discs, which obviously they rotate, and just have a think about the whole movement through the hips here. So I'm rocking in and out and just rotating those discs, just nice, easy, generalized movement. And then I'm going to come into the center, and now I'm going to put my hands on my thighs here, and I'm trying to keep my thigh bones nice and still and just rotate the feet. So that rotation of the feet, that movement that's happening through the rotational discs, is actually coming from my tibia, from my shin bones, and they're rotating in the knee. And I can feel that. It's quite a small movement. It's a movement we don't necessarily think about happening, but that's quite often what happens when we walk around with the feet out. We've got that lateral rotation of the tibia. So we're going to have a real think about rotating the tibia in, just to try and encourage that correction. So I'm holding the thigh bones nice and still, and I'm just rotating in, and then I return to center only, turning in and center only. Now as you're working this, try and keep those bunion joints on your disc. Try not to curl the toes, and focus the movement just on that medial rotation of your tibia. And then the last one there, and center. Now I'm trying to keep everything lined up from my knee down to my toes, and I'm going to go back to that rotation through the hips, which is really quite difficult, because what I want to do as I turn out is go even further with the feet. I don't know if you can see that, I pushed so hard I moved one. So let's reset that. And if I scoot my bottom a bit more forwards, so I'm on the edge of the reformer, we can get a little bit more movement, because I've got allowing the hips to move a bit more. They're not stuck against the edge of the reformer. It's quite difficult to isolate now the rotation through the hip. I don't know if you can see concentrated look on my face here, as I'm trying to make sure I don't let it go further beyond there. So just trying to control the movement, isolating the hip movement and keeping those knees and feet lined up. Great, I'm going to take a rest there. I'm going to suggest you take your feet off and then come up into standing. We're going to use the ball just for a short while. Again, thinking about that alignment. So I've got the ball here. I'm just going to sit down onto the ball. Nice and upright through the spine. I've got my feet walked slightly forwards. I'm kind of sitting, perching right on the apex of the ball, and I'm just going to roll that ball forwards and backwards. And again, just thinking about here, the knees lining up with the toes. So they're coming forwards in that lovely parallel line. And we'll just do one more there. And then I'm going to do the same but different in a lateral rotation. I'm just going to slide that disc out of the way a bit actually. And then we're going to take the feet kind of wide here. So I'm going into like a second position, and I'm thinking this V shape. So I'm going to come towards the point of one V and come back to the tip of that V, and then to the other length of the V, and then return. So again, I'm really feeling the knees lining up with the toes. I'm kind of looking at them here. I can see what's going on as I'm working. And as you come forwards, get a sense of the quads working around the knee there as you're bringing that knee forwards. And you just have to control, obviously, because you're on the ball. Nice. I'm going to do one more each side. keeping the spine nice and long and straight. And then return. And then I'm going to bring the heels in quite close to the ball, and I want to get a little bit of mobilization through the ankle. So I'm coming forwards now and controlling back. So it brings a deeper knee bend and a deeper ankle bend here. So as I come forwards, I'm getting a little bit of stuff going on through the Achilles tendon. When I say stuff, I mean like a nice kind of stretch. I've got to work, I've got to control. It's elongating as I'm coming forwards. Nice, I'm going to go one more each side. And then last one. And then bring it back into the center. We're going to come parallel. We're just going to fire up the legs and the glutes a little bit more by bouncing on the ball. So just take a little bounce first of all, and just keep the spine nice and straight. There can be a tendency just to collapse into the body. So keep it nice and straight as you're working. And then at the top of your bounce, see if you can just make a little almost like a rising trot feel. I'm pushing down through the feet, I'm bracing my quads, I'm using my butt. I almost want to pick up the ball with my butt cheeks if I could. We'll do 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, and then let that come back to a stop. Nice, that's always good fun, that one. All right, let's pop the ball off to one side. Great, and we'll just slide these discs out of the way. A moment, I'm going to put that one there. Actually, I'll put them on top of each other just for the moment to keep them out of the way. And then I'm going to do a scooter on the reformer. So I'm going to stick with a lighter spring. I'm popping one red on, and I put my red on to this side of the reformer, and I'm just going to kneel on the carriage here, holding on. This foot that's on the floor is slightly in front of the thigh that's on the reformer, and then I'm just going to push out into this kind of scooter position. Eve's lunge, this is often called, after Eve Gentry. And you're using your tummy muscles to press the carriage back. Eve Gentry was a Pilates elder, just in case you didn't know. Feeling the stretch through the quads here as I push back on the kneeling thigh, and a bit of hamstrings here as I come in and out into that splits position. I'm going to go one more. And then I'm going to return. Find an upright position just to hold here. Same hand that's on the floor, the foot that's on the floor. I'm going to put that hand on the hip. This one I'm going to lift up. So I want to feel a stretch from the kneeling knee to the reaching hand. I'm just getting open through the front of that hip there. Nice. Okay, so I'll come the long way round to do the other side. And then I'm going to change my springs on this reformer. So I've got the red on this side now, just one red, but it's on the side that I'm working. Now the reason for that is that it just helps to keep the carriage sliding nicely, and you don't get the torsion. So if I had the springs on the other side and I'm working slightly off to the side of the reformer, there's a tendency as I push back to get the carriage to twist, and it can make an unpleasant noise. So let's try and avoid that if we can. I'm pushing back with both legs here, and a guidance with the hands to get that sense of stretch through the front of the thigh and the back of the other thigh. I do like to think about this one pushing back a little bit more, because that's one that's often missed. Quite often we'll just sort of push with the front leg and forget about the back leg. So even push to find that even stretch. And I'm just going to take one more here. And then I'm going to put the hand on the hip, the other hand lifts up. So we've got that length from the kneeling knee to the reaching hand, and just I'm feeling nice and open, nice big stretch. And then release. We're going to come off the carriage now, and then we're going to come down and work some footwork. So I'm going to add that green spring on. So I've got one green, one red. You might like to have a little bit more if you like a stronger resistance on your footwork. But I'm going to come down into lying now onto the carriage and just place the heels onto the foot bar here. Take a moment just to feel your nice neutral spine, feel the thighs dropping into the sockets, pelvis is neutral, and I'm just going to easy push up and control back in again. So I'm pulling the kneecaps up the thighs to the hips. I'm having a little think about, I could even lift my head and check that thighs, shins are lining up with the feet. And I have got my toes just gently reaching to the sky as well. Nice and easy, just feeling the work through the quads as you're keeping yourself neutral onto the carriage. I'm going to go one more here and then bring it all the way back to the stopper. We're going to go take the feet a little wider here into your second position. We've got that V shape again with the thighs, and again I'm trying to check in to those shins lining up through the second toes. So again, what quite often happens here is you'll want to really turn out, and so we translate that right down to the foot, and that then takes the alignment out of the knee. So we're just releasing the foot so it's lining up with those knees as you do your pushing out and in. I'm going to take one more here, controlling back into the stopper. Now we're going to work the calves, so bring the knees of the feet together. I'm going to push up, staying on the toes, and then very gently reach the heels underneath for the calf stretch. Come back up onto the toes and then bend the knees and control back in again. I'm going to go 2 this time, so reaching the heels, return, reach the heels. Try and stay on the toes as you bend the knees and bring the carriage back in again. I'm doing 3 this time, by the way. And then control back in again. We've got 4, pushing through all the bases of all 10 toes again, just like we did standing. And then back in again. And I'll do one more round for 5. And of course you feel free to build it up even more if you like. I think this last 2 is me done on this one. And then I'm going to go again and stay there when I get there, and we're going to do running. So release one heel and then switch and switch. Really getting the control through the calves as you reach underneath. Try and make sure you're not just banging down into the heels. There's a nice sense of control as you're working. 4, 3, 2, and 1. Up onto the toes and then bend the knees and bring it all the way back in again. I'm going to place the heels onto the foot bar. I'm going to work a bridge. So you might like to add some more springs on. Let's see what this feels like. I'm going to roll through the spine and drive up into a bridge position. And then I'm going to melt the ribs down, 1 vertebra at a time, hitting that. This doesn't feel too bad actually. So quite often if the springs are quite light, you'll feel like the hamstrings are going a bit crazy here because you're trying to hold yourself at the stopper. So I'm working to pull myself into the stopper there. So deepening that knee bend, obviously that means those hamstrings are firing up even more. I got nice work through the spine as I'm peeling the spine off the mat. Lovely work through the glutes, and bring your focus into the glutes, especially if you feel like your hamstrings are going a bit crazy. Sometimes bringing the focus into the glutes can really help there. And again, as I'm coming up, I'm kind of reaching my knees over my toes. I find that helps with the lift. And of course, with the pelvis lifted, you do want to make sure your head rest is flat, so you don't feel too kind of squashed in the middle. I'm going to go one more here. Rolling up and rolling back down again. And releasing to neutral. Great. I am going to change the springs a little bit for some single leg work now. So what have we got? I'm going to take it to 2 reds. So I've added a red and I'm going to take off that green. So it's just a little bit lighter. Coming down onto your mat again, onto the carriage. We'll come onto the balls of the feet. We're going to bring one leg tabletop and we're just going to push up and down here. So again, controlling here. Now the nice thing about working on the reformer, I can really think about having this leg lining up underneath this hip. And again, I'm trying to keep control through the pelvis as I'm pressing up and down. I'm going to go straight into a bicycle, reach the free leg away, and then return. So if you feel like you've had enough on the one leg, you could always switch and do leg number 2. straight away, but I'm working into my bicycle immediately. All right, and now I'm going to switch legs. So I'm going to come back into the stopper, change legs, heel lining up with its respective sit bone. This one comes to tabletop. Hold that still as you push up and down. And just holding the leg still can be a little challenge. We sort of naturally want to almost do that reciprocal action of the bicycle, or both legs want to straighten at the same time. That often happens. Here we go. We're going to bicycle now, so reach the free leg away. Try and make sure that the leg goes all the way straight as you're reaching, because that'll tend to just hang a little bit sometimes. So energy through the pushing legs, energy through the reaching leg, all the while. Last two, and a one, all the way back into the stopper and take a rest. Now spring resistance is good here for some feet in straps, so I'll go ahead and do that right now. I'm lifting up my straps, nice and controlled as you push up part of the way. Press one foot in, push into that strap, and then take the other foot into that strap. And then we'll just start with a little bend and stretch. So I'm just going to bend the knees and then straighten the knees. Now, if you can coordinate the flexion of the feet and then the point of the feet, it's a really nice thing to do here. If that's too much to think about, just focus on the control of the knees. And you've got to watch here as well, because quite often the springs want to pull your bottom off. Completely different exercise. We're trying to really control through the pelvis here. Keep that still as you work the legs. We're going to make a change now. Reach the legs out long, and then we're just going to lift and lower the legs. Same thing, you're trying to keep that tail, the sacrum stays nice and heavy on the mat as you're working. Feet lifting, you've got lovely eccentric work through the hamstrings there, and you use your tummy muscles, focus your buttocks to push away. One more round here. And then we're going to add an adductor stretch. So I'm going to lift the legs, open the legs for the stretch, close the legs, and then push back away again. I'll keep going with that pattern. So lift, inner thigh stretch, return, and press away. So really controlling through the legs as you reach the legs away. I'm pushing into the strap so that the carriage doesn't move, and then I push even more to press the carriage away. Hope that makes sense. So keep the carriage still as you open, close. Pushing away, and one more. Lift, open, close, and push away. And we'll do one more set here. I'm just going to separate the legs a little bit and just want to get a sense of trying to control the legs a little bit separated as you lift and lower. Sometimes it's kind of easier to glue the feet together and really fire up your inner thighs to hold that connection. But here this is just a little more challenging with the legs a bit separated. Let's go for two more. And away. And one more. Make sure you've still got that nice heavy weight down into the sacrum. And then I'm going to come out, so bend the knees, take away one strap, find the foot bar with your free leg, then take the weight into that foot so that this strap can go completely slack, and then release that off. I'm just going to drop those overhead for now. And then we'll come on up into sitting again. Nice. So do you remember that single thigh stretch we did? We're going to do that again now, but we're going to use the rotational discs. So let's bring that in here, and then I'll go the long way round. And pop the other one on this side. Okay, so I'm going to just drop one of the reds off. So I've got the red spring on this side again. I'm going to go into this side as I'm here. Placing my hands onto the foot bar again. This knee's coming on. Actually, you know what? I've changed my mind. I'm going to put my foot on the rotational disc first, holding onto here, and then I'm coming on. Good. Right, so what I'm going to try and do here is keep the knees and toes facing forwards, just as I press away and control back in again. So it's just a little bit more challenging. Now that floor foot is on a moving platform as well. So I've just got to control that. and keep it forwards. Keep all 5 toes forwards. Nice. I'm going to go one more. And then return, and I'm going to see if I can find that balance again. So let the carriage come back in. Remember, you can put some weight down through that kneeling knee. Hand onto the hip, and then this arm's going to come up again for that stretch. I'm reaching from the kneeling knee to the reaching hand, and I'm working quite strongly through the standing leg to stop that rotation happening. And then release. Hopefully you'll see that a little bit better, perhaps on the other side. So holding on again, I'm actually going to stand down into the disc to step off and then step the other foot off. You can do it either way, but it can feel a bit wobbly sometimes. Right, so let's try the other side. So I'm going to hold on, step onto the disc, and then step up onto the reformer. Oh, I forgot to switch those springs, so let's do that now. So I've got my one red on this side, so it's quite light, so it means I do have to, and I've deliberately kept it quite light for this exercise, because I want to have to weight bear and control through this standing leg. So I'm using my abdominals as I push away, keeping the spine nice and long, trying to make this an active stretch, even push, even stretch, and I'm controlling through that foot that kind of wants to rotate a little bit there. All right, we're going to take one more here. And then I'm controlling back in again. Find the stopper, hand to the hip. I've got a weight bear down through the knee, through that foot. Control as I come up into that balance. Oh, that stretch feels really nice. So I'm reaching from the kneeling knee to that reaching hand. Super job. And then let's hold on to come off. So I'm trying, so you can absolutely do that, but can you see what happens? Quite often you'll push the carriage away when you release. So just to be aware of as you're exiting the reformer and your rotational disc. Right, we're going to do a little bit of side lying work now. So I'll just sit down for a moment just to do this. We're going to pop the headrest up here. And then I'm going to take the work that I'm going to do for a single leg, because I'm going to do some side lying. So I'm going to put the two reds back on. Let's try that and see what that's like. I'm going to come on around and grab my little shaped cushion, which I can add onto the reformer there. So that's going to support my head in a second. So I'm going to come down. I'm trying to work out which side to do first. So I'm going to come down and I'm going to roll all the way over. That's it. Nice. And then I'm going to lie down, and I'm actually, because of the size of the A8, I can lie down and actually end up with my feet kind of underneath here. So I've got my feet resting on the platform at the end there. Now, of course, I could put the platform extender in there as well, but I'm quite comfortable here, so I'll stay here. And I've got the little headrest up. I'm going to scoot that up a little bit higher so I can do that. Now, the other thing you can do if you don't have one of these is you could use a little small overball. Might be quite nice, might work well there. So I'm going to stay here and just do some clams. So I'm just going to, I've almost got a spacer there, so I can't lift the leg any higher than my foot bar. So just getting some rotation through the hip. I'm keeping my pelvic headlights square and forwards and stacked. And I'm trying to get the sense of working through that hip. Now, remembering back to the posture thing that we were talking about earlier, quite often the knees will drop in because the hip rotators are not so strong. So the knees knock in and then the feet point out. So I'm trying to work those hip rotators to get the strength around that hip area for this exercise. Okay, so we've done some plans. I'm going to bring this top foot on to the foot bar here, and we'll just have a little feel of what that works like. I'm going to lift this top leg and then straighten this one. So I'm going to keep the underneath leg straight, and I'm just going to bend and straighten the top leg. So again, I can take a look that the knee is lining up with the toe. I'm keeping connected through those abdominals. Now the temptation here, if these rotators hip rotators aren't working very well, the knee will tend to want to collapse in. So you've really got to work on keeping it connected, keeping it lined up. And I'm going to make this one my last one. I'm going to stay here and just do a little bit of inner thigh work with that underneath leg. So I'm just lifting and lowering that bottom leg. Always makes me think of Jane Fonda, this sort of exercise. Last 3, 2, and 1. I'm going to come back in and then I'm going to rotate that top leg. So now I'm turning out, and just watch the rotation through the bottom. My toe's going to hook on there, so I'm just trying to keep that leg fairly long. In fact, I'm going to point the toe, but I'm checking that this knee is laterally rotated as I'm pushing up and down. Now I can get a fair amount of lateral rotation there. You might find that's not quite as high, but whatever you're doing, you want to make sure your knee is lining up with your toes. Great. And as I say, the A8, because we've got a nice big base here, it makes these exercises a bit more comfortable than on some of the smaller reformers. Nice, we've got 2 more here. And 1. Nice. And then I'm going to release. And we're going to pivot around and do the other side. Now I can hook my feet underneath here to come all the way around to the other side. Good. So we clammed first. So got the pelvic headlights stacked on top of each other, and then I'm just going to work the clam here. And I'm really trying to get that feeling of working the lateral, deep lateral rotators of the hips. Particularly, of course, you're thinking about gluteus medius here. Easy clams. And as I say, I've got the space here to do this, which works well. Last 2 and 1. Lovely. And then I'm going to put that top leg on, straighten out, just have a little sort of taste test, check that you're as lined up, and then pressing up and down. Now quite often as you bend that knee, you might find that that heel lifts off a little bit. You can let that happen, but just try and think about the alignment through the leg. Pelvic headlights stacked, just a nice easy long spine, and as comfortable as you can through that neck. Sometimes that head position can take a little bit of a moment to work out if it's the first time you've done any sideline work. We're going to hold here this out, and then we're going to work the inner thigh. So I'm lifting the bottom leg to the top. 3, 2, and 1. I'm going to come all the way back in again, and then we're going to get that turnout happening. So sometimes as well, you might want to bring the heel very slightly forwards, and that will make it feel a little bit more comfortable to get that lateral rotation happening. Pelvic headlights are stacked, so try and minimize the temptation to kind of roll the pelvis back. Keep that forwards, but so you might find that works better if you take that foot further forwards on the foot bar. I'm hoping that makes sense. Again, just double check, knees lining up with the toe. Try and avoid your crash landing. Nice and controlled, here we go. I must be getting tired. Let's go for our last 2 here. Nice, and then controlling all the way back into the center. And then we'll just pivot around onto the back. So now I'm going to use those rotational discs again. So I'm going to pick this one up from this side and we'll come around. Good, good. I'll just slide this mat out of the way for us as well. And then we'll have the rotational discs on here, I think. So again, we're going to think about the alignment, and just as a little bit of a safety issue, as this is a shorter workout, sorry, not shorter workout, level 1 workout, we want to think about just using the gondola pole as a little bit of support. So I'm actually going to stand on these discs. So using the pole here, you could use it in front of you as well if that's better. Well, I'm going to take it to the side. And then we'll put one foot onto the disc, push down through that disc, and then stand on with the other foot. Good. Okay, So we're going to bend the knees and then laterally rotate and medially rotate. So I'm thinking here as I'm knocking my knees out and in, again, I'm trying to focus the control actually at this point in time through the hips. So I'm keeping my knees and toes lined up all the time, and I'm just working that lateral rotation through the hips. And then I'm going to come back up again. So it's interesting actually, you feel almost like you need the stick more when you're getting on and off. But we're going to put those two together. So I'm going to turn out, I'm going to bend the knees, I'm going to knock the knees together and then straighten and turn out. So I've got this kind of rotational thing happening here. Yeah, like a circle. Does that make sense? Definitely lots of rotational things happening. Rotational disc, rotational hips. Good. But we're trying to keep the knees lining up with the toes. I'm now going to reverse that. Turn in, knock the knees together, turn out and straighten the knees, and do that again. Turn in, knock the knees together, turn out and straighten. Good. Let's keep that going. So I'm thinking about lining up the knees. I'm thinking about working the quads all the while, and I'm going to do one more here. And straighten and come back up. And then I'm going to finish this set with trying to keep the knees facing forward and just work some squats here, straightening, bending and straightening the knees, just checking that the knees, again, lining up over those toes. And we'll do one more there. And then stepping off, we can use the stick again, because as I say, that feeling can be a bit strange. So I'm just going to try it now, just for fun, without the gondola pole. Now, of course, if you don't have your gondola pole, you could always use the tower or a wall, or even use the reformer foot bar as like a ballet bar. So let's see if I can work this one. So see how the foot wants to rotate, and then I'm bringing the other foot on, and then we're just trying to keep that alignment as you do your knee bends and straighten. Good, and it does work. Little knee bend here. I'm going to stay here and just finish off with those. So if you have got your wall nearby, you've got your fingertips there ready for action if you need it. And you might find, especially if you are an instructor and are working with a client, that you just need the wall nearby just to come on and off, because it does feel strange as you try and step off, that foot wants to turn and take you off on an angle. So just do be aware of that as you're working. Great. So we're going to finish off. We'll finish off with a nice stretch actually, and I'm going to use the tower here, but you could use, because I've got this set up here already, but you could use a wall. So I'm actually going to turn and face the tower, and let's move that out of the way a little bit. So imagine your toes are about a 4-finger width away from the wall. And then I'm gonna say what I'm doing. So I'm hoping that makes sense. I'm gonna step back with my right foot like a pigeon toe, and then my left foot with a pigeon step. And then I'm gonna take my right foot back to that 4 fingers away from the wall or your skirting board. Now my feet, I'm thinking about them being on train tracks rather than a tightrope. And I'm going to try and bend this front knee, and I'm trying to reach it in to touch the wall or whatever you're working against there. Watch the pelvis wants to turn. Keep the pelvic headlights facing forwards and get a sense of stretch through this back calf. You might get a sense of stretch through the Achilles tendon on the front leg as well. And then take a little rest. Now we're going to switch legs. So to do that, I'm going to take my right leg back to my left, return the left to that marker, and then we go again. Bend the front knee to try and reach the wall as I press the back heel into the floor. Nice easy length through the spine, and then feeling that stretch, as I say, through the calf of the back leg. Then a release. The reason I like that is that you've got sort of markers and you can get that sense of stretch, and you can make the stretch the same every time. All right, we're just going to finish as we started with our knee bends and calf raises. So outer hips lining up with outer ankles. Could you gently pull the inner ankle bones away from each other? Feel that beautiful posture. Bend your knees, straighten your knees, push all 10 toes through the floor to rise and release the heels. We're just going to do one more. Bend, straighten, rise, release the heels. Feel that perfect posture, perfect alignment. Well done. So for those of you that are interested in what I've been wearing today, I am in Tabby Noir. This is a high-low kind of loose top in garnet. The tights are full-length tights in lake. And then the toe socks that I'm wearing are in that half-toe L style.